Nintendo Switch is here, and with the snap of a Joy-Con, the 9th generation of home consoles has officially begun. With the exception of a few minor hardware concerns, last month's console launch seems to have gone without a hitch. Early reports are estimating that 1.5 million consoles were sold within its first week, and the demand for the hardware has been so thunderous that Nintendo has decided to double their Switch production from 8 million to 16 million units by the end of their fiscal year next March. You can practically hear the champagne pop and the glasses clink while Nintendo celebrates the start of a new chapter in the company's history. However, if we take a step back from the trees and try to gain a greater perspective of the entire forest, what do early sales numbers and a general customer positivity truly mean for the future success of the Switch? I love my Switch, and I sure as hell love playing Breath of the Wild, but I also remember having a similar affinity towards the Wii U when it kicked off the 8th generation of consoles in November of 2012. Regardless of how many high-quality titles the console had and its incredible Mario Kart attach rate, the Wii U will unfortunately be remembered as a major misstep within the company's history. Selling just shy of 14 million consoles over a 4-year time span, the Wii U is Nintendo's worst-selling home console. Made even worse by the fact that it was preceded by the Wii, a console that sold over 100 million units. So then the question becomes whether or not the same thing could happen to the Switch. Is the Nintendo of today the same company as the Nintendo from 5 years ago? The Wii U era was one of the darkest and most revolutionary time periods for the company, and if we want to understand it, we have to go back to the last time Nintendo was in need of a revolution, a few years after they had released their sharp-edged purple lunchbox known as the GameCube. After years of being the kings of the industry, Nintendo had found themselves backed into a corner. Sony had stolen the title right under their noses for the second generation in a row. The PlayStation 2 was on pace to outsell the GameCube 5-1, and to make matters worse, tech giant Microsoft had introduced their new Xbox console, which would also end up selling more units than the GameCube. The industry was beginning to saturate, and although Nintendo had stated that their success within the early years of video games was highly dependent on increasingly spectacular graphics, they no longer believed that they could continue to compete in this same manner. The traditional success formula of developing splendid and complex games has become less productive. This was a statement made by President and CEO of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, in response to why he felt the future of Nintendo hardware needed to go in a different direction. A direction which did not simply rely on processing power and graphics capabilities. Instead of focusing on the soon-to-be industry standard of high-definition graphics, the company's next generation of consoles would offer new ways to play in the form of unique hardware features which stood out from their competitors. Nintendo DS had 2 screens, a microphone, and touch capabilities, while Nintendo Wii introduced a motion-sensing controller. But more than simply innovating to be different, these hardware features would allow Nintendo to break the communication barriers which separated them from a more casual audience of consumers. An audience that was not necessarily interested in the more traditional style of game, played with a more traditional type of controller. Expanding the gaming population became the core strategy for Nintendo's business, but not without its fair share of criticism. Many third-party developers decided against fully supporting Nintendo's platforms, in fear that gamers would not adopt such underpowered devices. Publishers approached Iwata himself and let him know that they believed Nintendo had placed themselves in a heavily disadvantaged position and would have a difficult time amassing the same level of external support as their competitors. Few people believed that the Wii system would become the top-selling platform among all the consoles that would exist in the market. This placed both the Wii and the DS in a tough spot at launch. Although there were some external developers willing to try out the new hardware, it was up to Nintendo's internal development team to generate momentum for their consoles. Unable to sustain the initial momentum generated from the launch of the GameCube, developers and consumers alike lost faith in the system. Iwata was determined not to make the same mistake with the Wii, citing that it was critical for Nintendo to successfully demonstrate the unique value propositions for their new consoles by continually supplying compelling first-party titles. Creating compelling first-party content was exactly what they aimed to do, but not in the way we would expect from the company. Yes, there was Zelda, Mario, and heck, even Metroid. But Nintendo was serious about expanding the gaming population, and the result was something called Touch Generations.
In Wii Music, you can add barking to your tunes by simply pawing the air.
Touch Generations was a brand used by Nintendo to represent a group of Wii and DS games published by the company, which were directly aimed to attract a more casual audience of gamers. The brand name itself would end up being used more commonly in Japan than overseas, but the majority of games released under this initiative were available in all territories. For the DS, Touch Generation games included Brain Age, Nintendogs, and Art Academy. The Wii's Touch Generation games, on the other hand, received a multitude of titles carrying the Wii moniker, including Wii Fit, Wii Music, Wii Play, and of course, Wii Sports. The result, as we all probably already know by now, was incredible. To this day, Nintendo DS and Nintendo Wii remain as the company's best-selling handheld and home console respectively. What's more impressive, however, is that they were able to produce these incredible sales figures by achieving their goal of expanding the gaming population. It would have been one thing to simply regain market share taken away from Sony or Microsoft, but, like a Kool-Aid pitcher, Nintendo smashed through the conventional walls of the video game industry and drastically increased the gaming population by involving a customer base who had previously been uninterested in the hobby. After being about a $10 billion industry in the US for nearly 5 years, video game sales exploded by over 100% from 2006 to 2008. The majority of this rapid growth can be attributed to the Nintendo DS and Nintendo Wii, which, starting in 2006, both represented the clear majority of hardware and software sales amongst their competitors. Of course, none of this could be possible without a huge influx of new users buying video game products. In order to confirm their progress towards their goal of gaming population expansion, Nintendo annually conducted global surveys to help quantify the ratio of active versus inactive video game players. What Nintendo had discovered was that in Japan, the ratio of people who had played video games in the last year had increased from 35% in 2005 to 50% in 2009. The US showed similar results by having a 13% increase in surveyors respond that they had played a video game in the past year from 2007 to 2009. Even the gender gap was beginning to tighten as the ratio went from being a 57-43 male-female split in 2007 to a 53-47 split in 2009. Nintendo had successfully pivoted their business from solely making entertainment for core gamers to making entertainment for everyone. The best-selling titles on both Wii and DS were either games that had mass appeal such as New Super Mario Bros., Mario Kart, and Mario Party, or games that were specifically designed to attract a wider audience under the Touch Generations brand. In developing these titles, Nintendo had succeeded in generating momentum for their devices, and by doing so, they were able to gain the confidence of third-party developers, whose games would account for the majority of software sold on both consoles by 2007. It took some time for external developers to understand the strengths of Nintendo's latest hardware offering, but once they did, titles like Cooking Mama and Just Dance appealed to a wide audience of Wii and DS owners, selling better than many first-party games. The experiment was a rousing success. Nintendo had shown the gaming world that video games were for everyone, and by doing so had redefined the heart of the company. However, as was the truth with all hardware released in the gaming industry, nothing lasts forever, and it was up to Nintendo's next pair of systems to continue the legacy of the Wii and the DS into the next decade. Former president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, often had a saying he liked to use within the company. In the entertainment business, there are only heaven and hell, and nothing in between. The Wii and DS era was nothing short of a heaven-like time period for Nintendo. Their hardware and software sales were the envy of the entire industry, and both Sony and Microsoft responded by manufacturing products aimed at a more casual gaming audience.
And a medal is in the bag. How's my back look?
However, as Sony had learned when transitioning from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3, one wrong move could mean the difference between best-selling console of all time and potential disaster. All eyes were on the new king to see what they would do next. Nintendo's goal of expanding the gaming population had revolutionized the company, and in doing so, they helped grow the entire video game business. Yet, Nintendo was beginning to see the signs that the rapid expansion of the gaming population had stalled. Although the percentage of active gamers in Japan had jumped 15% from 2005 to 2009, it had only increased by about an additional 1% in 2010. The same could be said for the American and European territories, who were also starting to report diminishing returns. On top of this, sales for both the DS and the Wii were beginning to slow down globally. Iwata would remark that the Wii had lost its momentum and started to discuss with the company various ways they could develop a steady stream of software internally at Nintendo. The situation was far from dire, but Nintendo was having trouble supplying a regular stream of first-party titles for their customers, especially in Japan, where the lack of software for the Wii was classified as extreme. Although Nintendo was putting out great content for both of their consoles, the company had trouble sustaining sales for these newer games in the same way they had previously done with what they called their evergreen catalog, which included Mario Kart and Wii Fit. Iwata had theorized that the reason for this was that the video game industry was experiencing a strong trend where consumers were getting tired of various products faster than ever before. We at Nintendo have had a relatively large number of long-tail titles, but not all is going as we expected. As consumers bore of products more rapidly, we have to be speedier to make more proposals more than ever. Part of the reason why Nintendo is struggling to satisfy the increasingly large and demanding install base for the Wii and DS was their current relationship with third-party developers. For years, Iwata had regularly responded to critics by showing impressive results of a variety of third-party games which had sold extremely well on 3DS and Wii, but there was always a clear disparity between the titles that performed well on Nintendo hardware and the games that excelled on the systems of their competitors. When Iwata was asked how Nintendo would respond to games like Call of Duty selling significantly better on their competitors' consoles, he replied by saying, "I don't think that Nintendo can maintain the market alone," and promised that the future direction of the company would work to change the current situation. So with an aging handheld system and a home console whose magic was beginning to fade, Nintendo had their work cut out for them. Their success with the casual gamer crowd was flatlining, and traditional gamers were showing a strong preference to spend their time on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. However, Nintendo was very well aware of this, and as president of Nintendo of America, Reggie Fils-Aimé would say in his post-E3 2011 press conference, Nintendo was about to change their focus. There are really 2 points that we are focused on. One is that we looked at the system and we asked the question, what can we do to attract people who are not inspired by even the Wii Remote or the Wii Balance Board to participate in video gaming? And how can we, through this system, capture their attention? The second point that we focused on was how can we satisfy and meet the needs of everyone in the industry who is developing games now and their desire for HD visuals, and how can we convince them that this will be a system with which they can take full advantage of their game development? 2011 was shaping up to be the year where Nintendo would once again silence a growing group of skeptical critics. Just as they did with the DS and Wii, the company identified their weaknesses and had designed their next generation of consoles in response. With the DS reaching 6 years old last November, Nintendo would kick off their next chapter by launching the 3DS in March.
3D Play on Nintendo 3DS is on the way.
Like its predecessor, Nintendo 3DS was designed with a wealth of unique hardware features which would separate it from its competitors. The most obvious addition being a screen that could provide the player with a stereoscopic 3D picture without the need to wear 3D glasses. Nintendo was confident that the 3DS offered great value to both casual and traditional gamers alike. For the mainstream audience, the console presented a relatively cheap, hassle-free, portable 3D experience which allowed them to watch their favorite 3D movies and take 3D pictures of their friends and family. For hardcore gamers, the 3DS promised an increase in graphical capabilities, the addition of the circle pad control, and a more robust online presence. Nintendo 3DS would launch alongside a variety of games designed to attract a variety of consumers. Nintendogs plus Cats, Super Street Fighter 4, Pilot Wings Resort, and Ghost Recon Shadow Wars were all part of a lineup that Nintendo hoped would kick off a handheld platform which carried the promise of achieving everything the original DS did and then some. Looking to do the same for the successor to the Wii, Nintendo's rumored Project Cafe console would officially be revealed soon after the 3DS hit the market. Project Cafe would eventually be called the Wii U, a name which admittedly seemed like an odd choice at first, but upon further reflection it clearly displayed the goals laid out for the console.
Welcome to the world of Wii U. It's a system we will all enjoy together, but also one that's tailor-made for you.
A home console that was meant to regain the mass market popularity of the Wii, while also wrangling in you, the more traditional kind of gamer, who may have decided to skip out on the Wii ecosystem. The Wii U promised to be the magnum opus of Nintendo hardware. Here was a console which, from the beginning, aimed at delivering a premier experience to not just one portion of the interactive entertainment industry, but the entirety of it. The features which would attract third-party developers to make games for the Wii U were explicit. Wii U no longer carried the same inner architecture of the Wii, which was actually a relic from the GameCube era. Instead, the new console promised full high-definition graphics and increased processing capabilities. To go along with this, gamers no longer had to use a Wiimote and nunchuck to play AAA titles, as the Wii U gamepad resembled a more traditional kind of controller. Nintendo hoped that the gamepad, which could be used without even having to turn on your TV, would deliver innovation in 3 key ways. First, a new playstyle that is not restricted to the TV. Second, a new kind of entertainment using multi-screens. And third, and perhaps the most ambitious, the future of television. With a list of features that vowed to revolutionize your everyday TV experience and an unusually high number of third-party developers on board with the console, the Wii U had the potential to become an unstoppable force within the industry. Unfortunately, Nintendo had little time to linger on a home console that was a year away from launch. They were about to find themselves under the intense pressure of a handheld system struggling to keep its head above the water.